Hi, everyone. This is Sasha Hodder. You're on the HodlCast. Today is July 22nd, 2018, and I have the guest today of Ariel Deschapell, and really excited to have him on the show. He's going to be talking about the Lightning networks, and Ariel, he's a full stack developer, and he's done a lot of work in the web and Bitcoin, and co-founder of Trustless Apparel, the t-shirt I'm wearing. But where I got to know him first was, he's just a brilliant writer for CoinDesk. And maybe Ariel, you can give us, a little more elaboration on your background, how you got into Bitcoin, and
Sure. Well, first, you're too kind, and thanks for having me on the show.
thanks for coming.
Yeah, I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. Started reading about it in 2012, but 2013 was when I really started getting obsessed. Um, I've always been interested in economics growing up, and I was reading a lot of that in high school and going into college, which is when I first started discovering Bitcoin. At the same time, I was starting my career and interest in web development. So Bitcoin's kind of at the perfect intersection of both that tech side and the economic side. So it was just the perfect fit for me, really. I started writing for CoinDesk, like you mentioned, in 2014, and I've been contributing there on and off since then. And as well as just getting deeper into development in general, but Bitcoin more specifically, how it works on the technical side of things. And now, recently, past 3-4 months or so, playing with the Lightning Network and other technologies built on top of Bitcoin, and seeing how all that works and thinking about how it's going to continue to develop, evolve, and so on.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's a Lightning Network. We'll get certainly more into it, but it's something no one's
Sure.
really been able to explain it to me in a really succinct way. And when I was talking to Nick, he said, "Oh my gosh, you need to ask Ariel these questions because he'll be able to help with it all." So looking
I'll
forward to
definitely try my best.
that. And before we get too much into Lightning, what's new with Trustless Apparel? I know I always wear this Doe shirt, and every time I wear it out, I get so many compliments.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, actually, well, you said to get away from Lightning, but for Trustless Apparel, we're actually working on a Lightning Network promotion right now. So
Oh,
we've, yeah, we've had a Lightning Network integrated. I integrated on it maybe like a month ago or so, and I've just basically moved where our servers were, where we're hosting it, as well as updated the software itself since it's improving every day. So I'm reconfiguring things now and finishing that up today, and we'll be having a promo this week. Basically, a big discount for anyone who wants to try using Lightning to buy stuff off of our store if people want to get their feet wet.
oh, that's excellent. I'm gonna try and learn it to be able to.
It's fun. It's a learning experience for sure. Yeah.
So I guess the first question, can you just explain to people what is Lightning Network?
Sure. So Lightning Network is commonly referred to as a layer 2 ecosystem built on top of Bitcoins. And what that means is uh, people try to use analogies a lot of times when describing Bitcoin and the different protocols that are being built on top of it, which I think is kind of problematic, but it's useful in some cases. So if you're going to make a sort of an analogy, the best analogy would be to compare Bitcoin in this case to TCP/IP, which is pretty much the base layer of the internet. And what I mean by layer 2 is something that's built on top of that. So the web is like layer 2 on top of the internet. It's HTTP, HTTPS on top of TCP and IP. So the Lightning Network is a new protocol that's built on top of Bitcoin. But the idea is that over time, the difference between those two things will continue to shrink. Just like when you go to a website today, you don't consciously think, oh, I'm going to use the internet and then the web on top of that. No, it's just all very integrated together. So you really can't tell the difference. But it takes a while to get to that point. And the idea is that by creating the Lightning Network on top of Bitcoin, you're going to enhance the features and usability of Bitcoin. And the scalability, most important in the long run. So what the Lightning Network specifically does is increases the amount of transactions you can have on Bitcoin total by using a technology called payment channels. And this all gets very abstract, so I'll try and keep it, very simple, at least at first. But the idea is that the way Bitcoin transactions work is that when you create a Bitcoin transaction on the first layer, you broadcast it to the entire world, and it gets written in the blockchain eventually, and that transaction's final. That doesn't scale very well because every single person on the planet has to now replicate your transaction, verify it, add it to the blockchain, and there's only limited space available there. So using something called payment channels, you can create a transaction with just one person, and the only people who have to know about that transaction is you and the person you're making it with. And then in the end, you have all these transactions that you have between you and this other person, this counterparty. And instead of broadcasting them all to the entire world like you would with each Bitcoin transaction, you kind of bundle them all together so that they're contained all within a single Bitcoin transaction that just has the settled amount. So if we have a bunch of transactions between each other, we kind of combine that into one Bitcoin transaction that everybody sees. And the outcome of all those transactions is combined into one. So that way you're able to fit a lot more total transactions into the blockchain. And you also have some other nice benefits like increased privacy and so on.
So when you say it increases privacy, basically no one can see, like the government or the IRS specifically, are they not going to be able to tax on Bitcoin transactions if everyone's using the Lightning Network? Is that kind of how it will work, or?
So there's no silver bullet to privacy. There's only different degrees and different threat models. So nothing's perfect, and the Lightning Network certainly isn't. But it is an improvement over Bitcoin Layer 1 in privacy, because, like I said, on normal Layer 1 transactions, you're broadcasting to the whole world, hey, I'm this address, and I'm sending this amount of coins to this other address, and everybody gets to see that. So with the Lightning Network, the only person who gets to see an individual transaction is the person you're sending it to if you have a payment channel open to them. Or if you're using something called a multi-hop transaction, which we can get into later, then there's a chain of people who can see your transaction. But it's not the whole world anymore. So that definitely improves privacy somewhat. But you could still gain some information by, for example, you could still see the combination of transactions on the main chain. You can still see that aggregate. So every once in a while, you're still going to have to do a Bitcoin transaction on the main chain that contains a lot of transactions in it, most likely. So people can still see that and see kind of like what you're putting into versus taking out of the Lightning Network in general, and make some observances beyond that. Some people can create Lightning Network nodes themselves that have high liquidity that you want to use and link up to make your user experience easier, and they could be collecting information on their own. So there's different, it gets very nuanced, but it's definitely an improvement over Layer 1.
Okay, so
how improved it ends up being, we'll have to see.
So if I'm an exchange, or even just say if I'm a Bitcoin ATM operator who has a duty to report certain transactions to FinCEN, using Lightning Network, I could see the transactions myself that I would want to report, but no one else would see them on the chain. So then I would report what ones were relevant, or that I have the duty to report on.
Sure, yeah. So if you're operating a business. Yeah, if you're operating a business and you have your little Lightning Hub, you can still get all the information you need for your own reporting purposes or record purposes, for sure. But that's just going to be less available publicly to, someone I can just go do blockchain.info, right, and see all the Bitcoin transactions happening on the main blockchain right now. You can't do that with Lightning Network at all. That's not as publicly available. So getting that information is harder, but getting that information as it pertains to you specifically, it's still pretty easy.
Okay, so it would kind of make each person, like that's how it is for a bank right now, or any kind of business, or, they have their own information, but it's not shared with everyone in the world.
Yeah, so it's definitely more in line with that, yeah.
Okay. And what are fees like with the Lightning Network?
Right now they're super low. There's, I think, a default fee of literally just a couple Satoshi maybe, which is the lowest unit of Bitcoin. So it's very cheap right now to even do multi-hop transactions. But fees are just like in Bitcoin Layer 1. It's a very dynamic thing that will change as the network evolves. More people get added to it, and we'll have to see how that pans out as well.
And so this might make me sound silly in my technical knowledge, but is it that every node that's running every person that's running a Lightning node, they're verifying each of these transactions, or is it just the two nodes that the payment channel is open between that would verify them?
Yep, it's only those two nodes that are actually making the transaction. As far as all the other nodes on the Lightning Network are concerned, that transaction doesn't exist. They don't care about it. They don't have to do anything, which is in stark contrast to the way Bitcoin nodes work. If you're running a Bitcoin node, it doesn't matter if you're not making any transactions yourself. So you're still validating every transaction on the whole Bitcoin network. Lightning node is just specific to the transactions you're making, or the transactions that you care about because you're helping them route and getting a fee from it or something, and that's about it.
Okay, and speaking of fees, so what would be the incentive to open and run a Lightning node?
So yeah, the incentive, just like Bitcoin, there's going to be a lot of incentives. Some are profit oriented, some are not. Lightning Network has a more profit oriented incentive structure, though, in that by design, if you have a Lightning node, you're able to earn fees by helping route people's payments. So the way the Lightning Network works requires this connectivity between all these different nodes. You can't pay someone else with a Lightning node unless you have a direct route to get to their node. And that route means you have a payment channel open with one node that maybe has one open with another node that has one open with that person you're trying to pay. Or you have one directly to them. But if you don't have one directly to them, then you're going to have these intermediaries, and you're going to have to pay those intermediaries. So you have a node, a Lightning network that's very well connected, and you're connected to all these people, and someone wants to connect to you and use you to pay someone else. You can route their payment in a trustless way and take a fee off of it that's competitive with whatever the fee happens to be on the Lightning network at that time, and earn some revenue that way.
And when you say it's trustless, this would just, if I was running a node on my laptop, I wouldn't have to do anything for that except leave my laptop on. And then just by being connected to this network, it would know how to route the payment.
Yeah. So all that's very automated at this point, which is very nice, but it does require you to leave your node on, which is one of the big requirements right now. And there's things that are actually in development to help address that. So casual users can more effectively utilize the network without having to worry about all that infrastructure. But assuming you leave it on right now at the current state, it's all trustless in the sense that every transaction is atomic. And what I mean by atomic is that in computer science terms, you can't split that operation into any smaller bits. So when I want to pay, let's say I want to pay Nick, who you interviewed as well, I believe, and I have a payment channel open with you, and you have one open with Nick, and I want to pay Nick without having to open a payment channel open to him. What happens on the programming level is I'm making you a payment of, let's say, half a Bitcoin or whatever it is. And then at the same time, you're making him a payment of that half a Bitcoin. So he ends up getting that, plus you take whatever little small fee you want. That's an atomic operation in that you don't get your money until Nick gets his. And by giving Nick his money, I have to give you my money. So that can't be split any further to where I can rip you off and you end up paying Nick and you don't end up getting paid by me and so on. So it's very trustless in that the smart contracts involved don't execute unless everything executes.
Okay. Oh, that's very good. And so when did Lightning get started, and how many nodes are there now?
Lightning has been in the works for a long time. I'm trying to remember the original date of the white paper. I think it was probably like 2014 or so when conversation really started picking up, and then 2015 when there's a lot of buzz starting to build up about it. The software implementations have been all worked on for over a year now, at least, depending on which one. There's 3 main Lightning clients right now. There's Lightning Labs with LND, Blockstream SC Lightning, and then Async also has their own wallet. And they've all been released for mainnets just within the beginning of this year. So you started seeing them go online within January, February, and then they're all just got into their beta phase of development within the last month or two. So it's all very new. And in that short period of time, considering how early it is, it's actually growing at a really fast rate. Right now, there's over 10,000 channels open on the Lightning Network right now. So that's 10,000 connections that people have between each other. And within those connections, there's over 100 Bitcoin worth of liquidity. That's compared to a month ago, I think. Just a month ago, it was like around 30 or something. So it's exploded, and it's looking like it's growing in a very short amount of time, which is pretty impressive for where it's at right now in the user experience department.
Mm-hmm. And when you say 10,000 channels, that would be individuals like me and you around the world, or are they mostly concentrated within Lightning Labs or Blockstream?
Individuals. So if I have a payment channel open with you, and that's one channel in total. If I have one also open with Nick, then that means I have 2. So that's 10,000 channels. People can obviously have more than one. I forgot what the exact node count was, though.
Okay. And I've heard some people talking about the centralization or decentralization of the Lightning Network, saying that there's a risk that it could become very centralized. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure, yeah. So it's kind of just a question of economy of scale. Like I was saying, you have this profit motive for providing lots of liquidity and lots of connection on the network because you'll be very useful for making payments to other people at that point. And what that means is, let's say I have I have a limited amount of Bitcoin, which everybody does. That's how money works. And I can only open up X amount of channels with that. If I want to make the most out of the liquidity I have, I want to open up channels to people who can help me make the most payments. So I can have fewer channels and be able to make the same amount of payments with those channels to whoever I want. So the idea is that you're probably going to see some level of centralization around Lightning hubs who have a lot of liquidity, who have a lot of connections, who are able to offer therefore a lot of utility for payments, and therefore you're going to see a lot of liquidity and stuff kind of centralized in these hubs. Now, the thing is, I think a lot of the concern over that has been very overblown because centralization in itself is not too bad of a thing depending on the circumstance. You have to kind of think, okay, what kind of harm can be caused with the centralization? What kind of security concerns? And the fact of the matter is that hubs, any one node, even if it's a big hub with a lot of liquidity in the Lightning Network, has very little actual power. The only thing, like, it can't steal money from you. Like I explained, all transactions are atomic, so there's nothing it can do in terms of like theft. It can collect information, so that's that's definitely one of the legitimate concerns when it comes to privacy. But at the same time, it's still, even with super centralized hubs, it's still a better upgrade in privacy over Bitcoin Layer 1, where you're broadcasting everything to the whole world anyway. So even if the worst case scenario there for privacy, it's still better than Layer 1. And there's also not really any good attack vectors you can do with that. Like the worst case scenario is someone shuts down a Lightning hub when a lot of people are using it, and then you have to rebalance your channels and wait a bit and open up new channels to new nodes. There's very little disruption, in my opinion, that you can cause with centralized Lightning hubs. So yeah, there's going to be more centralization on Layer 2 for sure. But that's by design, because it's better to have some degree of centralization on Layer 2 than it is to have it on Layer 1, where you can actually see a lot of problems if that were to occur.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what's the risk of someone going and stealing the Bitcoin out of these transactions in between the two channels? How
Sure.
could that happen, or is it something that's impossible or impossible?
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible, and that's one of the things that was worked right into the early Bitcoin or Lightning Network designs, because in order for this to work at scale, you have to make it very, very hard to do, right? So it's definitely technically possible to steal funds, and someone could try and steal funds at any time. If we have a channel open and I want to, let's say, take money out of the channel that doesn't belong to me, it belongs to you, and you're not watching, like I could definitely steal it. So what is built into the software, and again, this all happens automatically under the hood, but it just requires you to leave your Lightning Network node on, is that if your node catches me trying to cheat, and it does that by watching the Bitcoin blockchain and making sure that I'm not making any transactions, trying to close a channel that you don't approve of. If it catches me trying to cheat, it basically possesses a cryptographic proof that it's able to release in response. And what that proof does is it proves to the network that I'm cheating. And as a penalty for my cheating, instead of me being able to get your coins or me even being able to withdraw my coins, you actually get all of my coins. So you're able to cheat, but if you get caught, like, you lose everything. So it's a very risky proposition to do, and that's built into the fundamental design of the Lightning Network, and that's kind of like what makes it very. It's not impossible by any means, but it's very hard. It's very risky, and it's getting riskier all the time as the technology and that security continues to improve.
Mm-hmm. That's just a neat way of setting it up by the designers.
Yeah, it's a very strong incentive system to not steal and not cheat.
Mm-hmm. And how hard is it to run a node? Like, could someone like me who's not, maybe I might be a little more technical than the average person out there,
Sure.
but I'm not, certainly not a developer or anything like that. Could I run a node?
Well, I'll be completely honest. So it's not something that's probably, if you want to run a whole node and you're setting it all up from scratch, it's not something you're probably going to get done in 30 minutes. It's definitely more like an afternoon thing, or maybe even a couple of nights, depending on how it goes, which can be different for everybody. But it's also definitely not attainable. It's not some crazy hard thing. There's plenty of guides now, depending on the implementation, several guides for each implementation, really, on how to do it, depending on how you want to set it up. If you're trying to do AWS or on your computer, what operating system, there's guides for everything. Those guides are not perfect, and I know this from a lot of experience, basically because it's so early right now, and the software is changing every day. The guides are becoming outdated, by the month. So you really have to find the latest ones, and most of the times it works like you would expect. Then there's weird edge cases where you just get super frustrated with how things are not responding the way you want it to, and it's not quite as smooth. So it's still not the best experience for just a really typical casual user who just wants to make payments fast. Like, definitely not. There's still a learning curve to it at this point, but it's not a crazy learning curve either.
Okay, and personally, I want to run one just to see how it works, and I think it would just be a fun thing to do. But if I was motivated
Definitely, yeah.
by more so of a profit motive, like well, I still have a little profit motive too, but how much money would I expect to make a month by running a node?
Okay, so yeah, there's definitely a distinction there in that it's you don't have to be that technical to set up a Lightning node, let's say, and start buying things, making payments. You do start having to get more technical in order to manage a lot of channels and do all the things that you would have to do in order to start routing payments and start making money off of that. So that does require like a more investment in time and more technical aptitude, I think. And that's basically just because of all of that kind of functionality is really just limited to CLI right now. There's a couple graphic interfaces for Lightning Network wallets, but it's really limited to, okay, open up a channel here and make a payment. But if you want to get really competitive and hopefully, make some revenue, like you're going to have to open lots of channels, which is easier to do and watch in CLI mode. And you're going to have to do stuff like set your fee rate and make it competitive and, broadcast your availability and all this stuff that's definitely more technical. Again, it's not something that is unachievable by someone who's not a developer, but it's definitely harder than just, the standard making payments. It's more of an investment there.
And so then is the 10,000 number that we're talking about of users, are they routing payments or they're just making payments with it?
A combination of both. Like I said, so because the fact that these transactions are all between the parties and not broadcasted to the network, it's a lot harder to measure these things definitively than it would be on like Bitcoin. So it's hard to say like who's just making payments, who's routing a lot of payments, unless they themselves come forward with that information and say, hey, like here's my Lightning Network stats for my specific node. So unless they come out and say that, like you really can't get that information just from looking at like some map of the network.
Okay. And what kind of industries do you see so far that are like adding the Lightning Network to their payment channels or payment options? I know you guys did, but how many others out there?
It's actually giving me a lot of nostalgia to Bitcoin in like 2013, 2014, because back then it was all about getting merchants to accept Bitcoin and pushing adoption that way. And basically that's where Lightning is at right now. Like it's a lot of people building a lot of little cool apps that aren't, like anything revolutionary other than the fact that they're using Lightning, which is it's a big deal in itself just because it's the only way you're going to be able to do scalable Bitcoin payments in the future. So it's just a lot of merchants that are enthusiasts like me and Nick are running Trustless Apparel, and also like cool little apps like Satoshi's Place is probably the most notable, where you're able to buy a pixel on this website and paint it whatever you want. But you pay for the pixel using the Lightning Network. So you're able to have scalable Bitcoin transactions that buy you things and so on these, they call them laps. Lightning applications, and just any kind of app that accepts Bitcoin payments through Lightning. So you just see a lot of little pet projects for now that are incorporating it. That's definitely going to change as we continue to develop the technology and watch it evolve. Personally, I'm most excited for Lightning Network technology impacting machine-to-machine payments. So that's payments that, let's say you have a client that wants to make a API call to a server for whatever data you want on some network, and you pay it, a fraction of a penny in Bitcoin through a Lightning Network channel for every request that it serves or something. And you're able to do very scalable, cool things like that, which what people want to do with Bitcoin originally, a lot of these micropayment use cases and stuff like that, but that people soon discovered didn't scale on Bitcoin Layer 1. We can now do that stuff in Bitcoin Layer 2 as it continues to progress, and it'll actually work in the long term.
Oh, that's awesome. So where do you see this taking the future of Bitcoin?
Well, I definitely see it helping take Bitcoin more mainstream because one of the big concerns over the past, let's say, year with Bitcoin has been the fees. So whenever there's a big increase in price or big activity of any kind, you'll see Bitcoin transaction fees rise in accordance with whatever the demand is. And there's only so much you can optimize for that on the first layer without sacrificing stuff like decentralization on the first layer, which is a big security concern. So instead, by moving transactions into the second layer that scales better just because you don't have to broadcast everything to the whole world, you're able to achieve much greater amount of transactions and therefore lower fees with Bitcoin in total, and as well as open up a lot of interesting use cases that you couldn't before, like I said, the machine-to-machine payments, and hopefully making inroads into different industries there.
And they're also much faster, right? The Lightning
Yeah,
ones?
they're instant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great point. No, they're instant. So when you make a Bitcoin transaction, it broadcasts instantly, That's never guaranteed. So you always want to wait 1 to 3 confirmations typically for a Bitcoin transaction or more to make sure it gets into a block and it gets mined to the blockchain and so on. With a Lightning Network transaction, the confirmation is instant because you have this smart contract that guarantees you this payout in Bitcoins. And again, like I said, if you tried stealing that and breaking that contract, you're forfeiting all of your Bitcoins. And that's not something anybody really wants to take a big risk on. So you have an instant confirmation of the funds rather than having to wait 10 minutes or risk not receiving them and so on.
Excellent. And so any predictions of like where you think we'll be this time next year with Lightning or?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know.
It's hard to
Honestly,
know.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Like I don't want to sound outrageous, but at the same time, I don't want to, underplay it because who knows what can happen. Like I said, it went from 30 Bitcoin to 100 Bitcoin in capacity in just a month, really. So if you extrapolate that and follow the trend, like it could get really big really fast. It could peter off at some point. Who knows? But I definitely know that technology is definitely going to be way ahead of where it is right now, a year from now. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Do you think how will it impact some of these altcoins? Do you think it'll like make them obsolete if Lightning does what it's anticipated to do?
Yeah, that's probably one of the more popular theories I've seen going around, that if the Lightning Network takes off and it makes Bitcoin transactions cheap, it's going to kill a lot of these altcoins. I actually don't believe that's true because the assumption behind there is that these altcoins are used because they have cheap transactions and are used for cheap transactions. I don't think that's true at all. I think most altcoins that we see, pretty much all of them, are just based off speculative value and it's people trading them. And that doesn't change just because Lightning Network enables cheap transactions with Bitcoin. So I really don't see it killing app coins or altcoins of any kind in any meaningful giant way, no.
And how do you think, this might be another kind of hard question to answer, but so some people have speculated that the price on Ethereum went up so much because every time someone was buying into an ICO, they first needed to buy Ethereum. Will the same kind of thing be happening with Lightning? Like every time someone's doing a transaction, or will it make what price impact will it have on Bitcoin? Because actually it's going to make less transactions overall for Bitcoin. So how will that move the price?
I think it's going to be, of course, overall very, very bearish for Bitcoin, and mostly just because it's going to give people confidence that the real innovation is happening on Bitcoin, in my opinion. And that Bitcoin is going to be able to scale in the future, which has been one of the big concerns over the past year or two. So as people see this developing, even if it's not being used, that much, just the fact that it's there and that it's able to handle a big on-ramp of users in the future when it needs to, I think it's going to be very bearish for Bitcoin as a technology and as a platform.
Bearish is bad, though.
Bullish.
You mean bullish.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Got mixed up there. Sorry.
That's okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. It's good for Bitcoin. So every time someone opens, they have to do some kind of Bitcoin purchase, and when they settle, they'll also be doing a purchase. Like it'll be hopefully.
You need Bitcoin to use it because you need Bitcoin to open channels. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. What else? Anything else about it that maybe I didn't ask?
Let's see. We covered privacy. We covered the instant transactions. We covered kind of the difference between layer 1 and layer 2. I think those are the big things. I can speak a little bit as to where I see the development going and different features that have yet to be developed. Like I said, one of the big limitations right now is all of those things I said about security and stuff hold true. But the assumption is that it only holds true if you have a Lightning node that's running full time on your own to watch your channels. If your Lightning node goes offline because, let's say, the power goes out or you just forgot to leave it on for whatever reason, then if I'm aware of that as your counterparty, I could now steal funds and you have no recourse. And by the time you figure out what's going on, my stealing funds is already in the Bitcoin blockchain and you have nothing that you can do. So that is a problem for scalability and for casual users. The main development right now that's being worked on to kind of address that is something called the Watchtower system, which basically means that instead of having to run your own node and watch your own channel continuously, you can outsource that function to other nodes on the network to watch it for you. So you can contact and contract, let's say, 3 other nodes and say, hey, I'll pay you, whatever fee in order to watch this channel, so I don't have to run my own node all the time anymore, and you can watch it for me.
Okay. Well, that should solve it then. If at any time something happens to your node, you've got three others that are going to watch it for
Exactly, exactly, exactly. We can pick up the slack there and catch the people cheating if that does happen.
you. Mhm. And one other thing, so the people at Blockstream, are they like they're a lot of the core Bitcoin developers? Is that correct? And at Lightning Labs, is that so? It's the main core people that built Bitcoin that are working on this project. Is that
Yeah, Blockstream employs and has employed in the past several different core developers for Bitcoin Layer 1. And Blockstream is also one of the companies that has their own Bitcoin, or Lightning implementation, C Lightning, which is written in C. So a lot of the same people, there's a lot of overlap definitely with the people working on Bitcoin Layer 1 core development and now the Lightning client implementations, although there are people who are just focused on one or the other, of course, as well. And then Lightning Labs has their own implementation, and that includes a lot of great people like Roast Beef, as he's known online, their CTO, who are Bitcoin and Lightning devs, and just great devs in general. A lot of smart people who are working on it.
awesome? And that doesn't create any kind of brain drain risk from layer one, does it?
No, no, I think there's actually a lot of value in the overlap. The type of people, like the majority of people who are contributing to Layer 2 right now, are definitely people who wouldn't be able to contribute a lot or as much to Layer 1. It's definitely more specialized than Layer 2 is, but at the same time, the people who do have overlap, they have a lot to contribute that they wouldn't be able to do just working on Layer 1, for example. There's a lot of, I guess, cross-pollination, benefits that you get from that. So no, definitely not. I think they're very synergistic with what they're trying to achieve. A lot of the things that are being developed in Layer 1 have input coming from the Lightning Network people. So one of those is a new SPV wallet mode called, there's a Bitcoin improvement proposal, BIP 158, which is a new light client mode. And that's designed specifically with the Lightning Network in mind because it means it gets really technical, but it's basically a light client mode that's very beneficial for light clients period, but also for Lightning clients specifically. So that's something that's being incorporated into Bitcoin Core right now, but that originated from the Lightning project. So there's a lot of stuff and collaboration going on back and forth that's very synergistic.
Awesome. Okay, well, I guess like that kind of, I feel a lot more educated about Lightning networks. Hopefully anyone that listens also understands it better. You did a great job articulating it, Ariel. Thank you.
Thanks. Any outstanding questions or things I can clear up?
Okay, so if I want to buy a t-shirt from you using it, how do I,
Yeah.
where do I start? Can I
Well,
do it
there's
on my
lots of
laptop to open a channel or?
sure if you have a pretty good laptop,
And
probably
I
going to be.
have almost no extra room. I'm running
Oh, then unlikely not. So the
yeah.
easiest way to do it right now, and again, you can set this up a variety of ways, but the more complicated you get, the more the development experience helps. But the most straightforward way is to set up a machine where you have plenty of space and stuff because you're going to have to set up on the same machine a Bitcoin node if you don't have one already, and then a Lightning node to connect to that. If you wanted to do something more complicated, you can set up a Bitcoin node somewhere else and connect your Lightning node remotely to it. But now that starts getting more into the configuration, which gets a little weedy. But if you have those two things, if you have the Bitcoin node and the Lightning node, you go onto the computer that you have the Lightning node on, and then from there you're able to either with the command line interface, which is pretty straightforward, or with one of the GUIs, graphic interfaces that are in test right now, you just open up a channel to our store, which you can get the address from when you make the Lightning payments. When you choose the Lightning payment option on our store, open a payment channel, and then in the payment channel, you can make a transaction. Or you can find someone who has a payment channel open to us already if you're trying to make a multi-hop payment just to experiment, and you can open up a payment channel to them. And then as long as you have some kind of route, either a route directly to us or a route to someone who has a route already open to us, you should be able to make a payment.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to try and learn it, but it might involve buying a new laptop to get it all set up.
Yeah, definitely need some room for the Bitcoin blockchain if you don't have it right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. That I like to post on, fairly regularly. Not a Sith Lord is my handle, and you can also see my articles and written work. Most of it can be found at CoinDesk.com, just under my name, Ariel Deschapell. And yeah, those are my two main outlets.
Okay, great. And are you doing any speaking engagements or anything like that anytime coming up, or?
I would like to do a video presentation at some point in the future, but at the moment I'm pretty busy and have my head down a lot of different development projects related to blockchain and the web. So right now I'm just focused on that probably for the next few months, and hopefully I'll open it up to more speaking gigs in the future.
And any conferences coming up?
Scaling Bitcoin is the one that I intends on attending,
When's that
and
one?
that's in October 7th, I think, beginning of October in Tokyo, Japan, actually.
Ooh,
So yeah,
okay.
I'll be flying out for that just to experience Japan for the first time. And I went to Scaling Bitcoin last year, which was hosted at Stanford in California, and that was I had a huge blast there. So I'm looking forward to it again.
Oh, nice. I just heard of a cruise in early September. It's in Barcelona. I might try and
Ooh.
go on that one. And then I know on Halloween in Vegas, there's one where Lynn, Ross's mom, was telling me they're going to set up a
Uh-huh.
lot of like early Bitcoiners are going to debate each other, but they're going to be in a boxing ring. I don't know if it's going to be where the UFC, host their fights or not, but it's going to be somewhere in Vegas. And it's going to be real. I think it'll be really good. And all the proceeds are going to go to Ross's legal defense. So I'm going to
Oh,
try and
nice.
make that one in Vegas and maybe this Barcelona one, but I don't
Is
know.
the Barcelona one called is it called the Crypto Cruise by any chance?
I think so. I know Tatiana's going on it, and then Leah
I would just
Wald just
guess.
told me there's like a deal if you have 3 girls in a room, they give you a special deal. So Leah, Adela, and I might get a room, but we'll see.
Sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, yeah, it should be good. But so many conferences, like every weekend, you could go to one if you wanted to. I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a boatload. Sometimes you just have to tune it out and get to work, and then other times it's conference season, so it's a balancing act.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, and it was definitely a blast. Love talking about this stuff and educating people whenever I have the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Ariel.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.
See you. Bye.